the most intrinsically rewarding way I could probably live my life was to resist my labels. Elon Musk or Kanye West, I don't love all of their ideas, but the thing I love and admire most about those individuals was they didn't let their past or a label or anything define them. And that inspires me. I think that's a free way to live. I think everybody, the vast majority, 99% of people don't live freely. They live confined by words that, their mum or dad or themselves have given them.
First off, mate, I need to say thank you for dinner, because the last time that we were together, we were overlooking downtown Dubai, and you invited me and a buddy out for a really wonderful evening dinner. But then as you left, I was in the toilet, so I haven't actually got to say goodbye. So thanks for dinner, mate, and also welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I left abruptly because I had a flight to catch that night, and my suitcases were actually downstairs. So when my PA grabbed me and said, you've got to go now, I quickly scrambled and exited the building. But yeah, thank you. It was good to meet you and catch up with you and such. And I'm excited to be on your podcast today.
Yeah, me too, man. So why did you write a book? You've got a lot of stuff online already. Like, why do you need a book as an outlet?
There's a couple of, you make a really good point. We live in an era of, instantaneous feedback, and I'm a connected from birth. I'm part of the connected from birth generation where I've had some form of online connection for my whole life, and things have got even more superficial and ephemeral as I've got older. So you're right, I've got millions of followers online. If I've got a message to communicate, why don't I just do an Instagram story or something which gives me that sort of instant feedback? And I think, in fact, that was paradoxically why I needed to write the book, because of the way that the world is heading, and the lack of meaning and how shallow and surface level things are getting. And for me, the book is the antithesis of that. It is depth, it's meaning, it's something you spend 2 years doing, and then once you're done, you still have another year's wait until it's published. And it was a chance to really, there's so many things with books that I came to learn that you don't get with social media as well. One of the real big things, which I think changes the way you create your ideas, is because you don't get instant feedback, or pretty much not a lot of feedback at all. There's no comment section. You write with a certain level of freedom, which is quite rare these days. So I got to go deeper than I've ever gone before. I know that if I write a page, it's not going to be discussed instantaneously. And I think that allows thoughts and ideas to connect in a different way. So for me, it was a bit of an experiment, to be honest, something I put off for a long time. But just to conclude that point, there was one day where I looked at my diary from when I was 18 years old, and in the front page of it, I'd basically written that I wanted to be a happy, sexy millionaire. And I read that when I was 26, and I built this massive business, and I was traveling from one country to another. And that was the moment where I thought I wanted to write the book, because it dawned on me how dumb I was to aim for that, and how many other people are.
An interesting point around the instant feedback. I had Seth Godin on the show, and he said that about a decade or a decade and a half ago, he removed comments from his blog. Remembering he's one of the biggest bloggers on the planet. And people say, you can't remove comments from your blog. It's a blog. You're not allowed to do that. And he was like, well, I know if I leave comments on, I'll just add an extra caveat here and a little bit of a justification there, because you're writing to preempt what people are going to say back. And I think, the low-tech solution of just words on a piece of paper is good. The title as well, Happy Sexy Millionaire. Were you tempted to call it just Be Consistent for a Really Long Time?
No, so the title, as I say, comes from when I was 18 years old. So I'm an 18-year-old kid. I arrive in Manchester, and I decide that I'm going to drop out of university. I know what I want from my life. For me, it's pretty non-negotiable that I'm going to become, one way or the other, a very successful multimillionaire at a very young age. It was always from the age of 14. I got to the point at 14, 15 where I was so convinced that was going to happen. With no evidence and no understanding of the future world that I would face. But I was so convinced. So I arrived in Manchester at 18 years old, realized that this degree wasn't going to give me what I needed to get to where I needed to go, and dropped out, and then wrote in the first page of that diary, which I've posted on Facebook if anyone wants to check it out. I just wrote four goals that I have before I'm 25. A Range Rover Sport was going to be my first car. I was going to make £1 million before I was 25. I was going to work on my body because I was super skinny. And I was going to have a long-term relationship with a girl. 4 very simple life goals. I wanted to be sexy and rich because I thought that would make me happy. And that's where the book starts.
Where does that self-belief come from?
It's a great question. And I think I'm always super scared of indulging in like hindsight bullshit where you look back and you say, oh, this and this is why I am the way I am. I think largely like 70% of the time, 80% of the time, we don't know. But if I was to hypothesize logically where belief comes from generally, other beliefs that I have, the answer is clearly evidence, right? Some form of evidence that you have and what you sort of derive from that evidence. And the example that I give, and I think I give this example in my book as well, is I talk about if I was to try and make you believe that I was Allah or Jesus Christ right now, and I held your mother hostage at gunpoint and told you to take that belief on, the only way I'm going to release your mother from gunpoint is if you start to believe that I'm Jesus Christ, right? You couldn't believe it. You couldn't genuinely believe it, even if everything was on the line. And so I used to think about that and so, okay, well, if we don't actually choose our beliefs, we choose our faith, right? You can have faith in something or somebody, but we don't actually choose our belief. Where are they coming from? That in that same analogy, if I take this bottle here full of water and I turn it into wine and then I start levitating, your belief might start to change as it relates to me being a deity or something. And so you take that back and you say, okay, so if our beliefs are based on some kind of evidence we have and what we derive from that, maybe our self-belief is too. Maybe we're compounding a set of personal case studies in our life that are telling us that we are capable of something or that we're not. And it tends to be the case that from the things that I've read anyway, that the positive case studies upwards are slower. So I do one thing, I speak on stage in front of 10 people, I'm like, okay. And then I can do 15 the next day. But when it compounds downwards against you, when your self-belief or any belief compounds downwards, it's rapid. You go on stage and speak in front of 10 people, they heckle you, you forget your words, you never go, trying to get back to that stage again it's tough. And so I think from a very young age, because of my parents' absence, they weren't around when I was younger and I was basically raising myself from about 10 years old. I learned this very important connection that I hope my kids one day have, which is if I'm going to get something, whether it's dinner money or the nice pair of shoes that I want because I'm broke and all the other kids have them, it's going to come from my own actions and behavior. And you learn that at 10 years old, that if you're going to get shoes or football, whatever, lunch, it's going to come from something you do. So that sense of independence helped me create a bunch of case studies for myself, and some social factors I think are what gave me my sense of self-belief. That would be my guess.
I think that you're right, and it highlights something I've been thinking about for a long time. We presume in 2021, because people conflate the words confidence with extroversion and being charismatic and outgoing. All of these words move in the same sort of fields, but confidence isn't the same. Confidence isn't given, it's earned. Naval Ravikant has this quote where he says, self-esteem is the reputation you have with yourself. You'll always know. And a lot of the time, I think people want the self-belief, the outcome, the I can achieve anything mentality when they have zero evidence that it's going to actually happen. And this is where small wins come in, right? Clean your room, make your bed, do the little things and build up. And that's what you've said, the progressive overload.
Yeah, and this is why I've always had this allergic reaction to this idea of like pure play visualization, because it's such a dumb thing to me. This idea of that there's almost this emerging culture where people will get up in the morning, they'll repeat these 3 affirmations, and it's kind of like my analogy of just saying that you think I'm Jesus because your mom's going to die. Like they'll look in the mirror and say, I am strong, I am powerful, I am whatever. And then they'll write on their little list of visualizations that I'm going to be a millionaire. And but they haven't built any personal case studies. They don't actually believe at all what they're saying. It's just a bunch of nonsense. Like in their own self-esteem, that is just a bunch of like wishy-washy. The difference is at 18 years old, I believed I was capable. And I used to say to people at the time, I was like, if you tell me that I have to go to Mars this week, my brain defaults to like find out how to make it happen. Not it's not possible or why won't it happen? And for some, I had that because of a set of case studies that preceded that moment. And some people don't. And this is why, I'm quite against the whole secret lifestyle that some people live, where it's all about visualization and not enough about, small compounding efforts in the right direction. Yeah.
We're in the same page there. What does the things that invalidated you when you were younger are the things which will validate you when you're older mean?
Yeah, so I think the quote from the book is, the things that invalidated you when you're younger will be the things you seek validation from when you're older. And you could, that can be anything, right? So for me, imagine this. I come from Africa as a 2-year-old kid, and you put me in an area where everybody is richer than me. Everybody has a different hair color than me. Everybody has a different skin color than me. You put me into a street where everyone's house is perfect, right? Perfect, like out of a movie. And mine has 6-foot grass and fridges and TVs in the front garden, back garden. The front window on my house is smashed. So this is already a kid that has some kind of insecurity at that age as well. And so I was invalidated by that. I was invalidated because the things that made me feel invalid or insecure were like money and the fact that I could never have a girlfriend or have a girlfriend come over to my house because it was a shithole. And so as I got older, you get to 18, you're like, I'm going to try and fill that hole. And so the things that had invalidated me when I was a kid, which was like female attention or money or whatever it was, became the things that were most valuable to me in my perception to seek and to chase when I was older. And you see this no matter who you speak to, whether it's your dad invalidated you by, giving you the impression that you could never be like him or you weren't good enough. And then, most of my billionaire friends, I think 2 of my billionaire friends, and I haven't got that many of them, both of them have almost an identical story where their dad invalidated them when they were younger. These are 2 billionaires you would know. And they spent their early years ruthlessly chasing that validation from somewhere.
Isn't it interesting that in the meritocracy, quantifiable metrics of success world that we live in now, that we can look at someone that has the £1 billion, but the completely uninternalized, unactualized sense of self-love and consider them a success because we never get an externalized scorecard of their internal state.
Yeah, and this is like a lot of the work that I'm sure you do, but like what I try and do with my podcast as well is I've had, one of the best things that ever happened to me was I was an 18-year-old kid, 19 or 20, probably about 20 years old. And I got to meet the guy I wanted to be.
Who was that?
Imagine that. So I can't say his name.
Okay.
But he is a young billionaire. So I got to meet the guy that I wanted to be when I was that age. He was like a couple of years older than me, maybe 7 years older than me. He had his 9 sports cars, right? So he's probably, at the time, he's probably 29 and I'm 22. Mansion, billionaire, like young kid running a business, whatever. And I got to meet him and I got to get to know him. I got to go to his house. I got to have private conversations with him at 5 a.m. And I got to go around his house and look at all of the things that I thought I wanted from my life. It's probably the most important experience I ever had. I got to go into his Louis Vuitton room upstairs and look at all of the Louis Vuitton bags he had. 9 rooms full of fur coats, Louis Vuitton. 1 trainer room, which is bigger than my house now. And it's all rainbow, like perfectly color coordinated all the way around the room. And then I got to go downstairs and speak to the guy for hours. And he became a friend. He's been my friend for about 5 or 6 years. And miserable. Miserable and probably the last person I'd actually want to be. But on the surface, he was the mousetrap. He was everything I was chasing, everything I thought I wanted. But when I got to go behind the scenes, the last person on planet Earth that I want to be, deeply miserable and tormented. And he wants to be normal in his own words. He said to me one day, he sometimes goes to supermarkets and puts stuff in the trolley just to act like he's a normal person. And he doesn't actually buy this. And I was just like, fuck. You've got it all wrong. Stop. And this is, again, part of the inspiration for the book, which is like, I got to see that stuff before I got to, run down that hedonistic treadmill, and it helped me turn back.
Can you tell us about this story about the cushions in the chicken shop and the satisfaction for millions of pounds? I really like that.
Yeah, so I remember this day very vividly. I didn't write his name in the book, but I was with my friend Anthony Logan. I think you might have met Anthony.
We did in Dubai.
Did you meet Anthony Logan?
Yeah, I was sat next to him.
So I was with Anthony Logan in Manchester at this place called Living Room, and I was really, really broke at this point, to the point where like I genuinely on a day-to-day basis didn't have a pound to feed myself. So I was taking every day at a time while I was trying to start my business. And I went into this place called Living Room, which is this like takeaway place, this food place. And I'm sat there and I put my hands, I think a pound coin fell out of my pocket. And as I reached down to retrieve it, there was so much more money down the sofa. And I just went around all of the sofas in this It's like restaurant place. And I managed to retrieve about £13 in total. And it was like the best day of my life. At the point I was at in my life where I was living in Moss Side, above a Chinese takeaway in a house that was battered and full of rats, finding these pound coins in that restaurant that day felt like a gift from God, and an absolute euphoria. And I think what I write about in the book is that day, that moment where I found that 13 quid, which meant that I could eat for maybe the next 10 days or so, was like 30 times more euphoric than the day I woke up in that 5-star hotel in Manchester and I looked at my phone and someone had texted me saying, oh, the company's now public. And, you do the mental math about how much money that means you now have. And I just felt totally numb. And I contrast those two moments in my book. And this is where I kind of start to introduce the idea of bring the Stoic philosophy into play and why those and contrast and why those moments felt so different. The day that I became, a multi-millionaire versus the day that I found £13 in a chicken shop. Were two completely different days. One was euphoria and one was anticlimax. It's actually when you expect something to be a certain way, when you expect it to be euphoric and it's not, it actually becomes a negative, which is interesting. So and this is the whole idea of this is a general principle about expectation and reality. Like the difference between what you expect and what you get is your level of satisfaction. And in that moment, I've always expected that day where I became a multimillionaire to be confetti and marching bands and euphoria. So when it wasn't, and when it came in below my expectation, it was actually a big negative. Yeah, until I did some mind games.
Can we sink into that time? How do you get yourself to a place where you can leave your company? This is, as you say, a young kid who's never really had money, who's never really had quantifiable metrics of success. A lot of people would struggle to give up the good for the great. Is quitting a skill in that way?
Yeah, quitting is definitely a skill and it's really underrated. I think, people spend a ton of time, words are really shitty. This is one thing that I really came to learn in my book is most of the time, when we try and answer difficult life questions, we get trapped in words and I love you. Do you love them? Is this your passion? We forget that these are actually human words that some other guy made and attached some definition to that they felt or they were trying to describe in their life at that time. And so it's crazy. As I'm writing this book, I'm trying to answer these questions. And then most of the time, the question is answered by questioning the question, something we just never do. We accept words, right? And to get to your point about quitting, one of the things we hear in society, which has really held people back, a set of words is quitting is for losers, right? Quitting is seen as this really, really bad thing. You just prevail. But then they glamorize starting, and starting is seen as this, this amazing to be admired adventure that people go on, whether it's starting a business or a hobby or whatever. But the crazy thing is the often unappreciated but very important necessary thing you do before you start something else is you quit something. And quitting and starting go hand in hand, right? In all facets of our life, like a monkey swinging through the jungle in Costa Rica, they have to let go of the last branch in order to grab the next. Quitting in itself is just as much of a skill as knowing when and what to start. And in my life, quitting decisions have quite literally defined me. Quitting school, quitting university, quitting my first company, Wallpark, where I'd still be now trying to make it work. Quitting Social Chain more recently. And I see quitting as a skill. In the book, I talk about this quitting framework I've devised, which will hopefully give people a bit of a guardrail or sort of a bit of a flow chart to consider when they're deciding to quit something. I've quit effortlessly my whole life, and I've never known why. I've never known why quitting has always been so easy for me. But when I got time to write out what my brain is doing, it started to make very logical sense. I'm very, very logical in the way that I think, and quitting has always been easy. So I presumed it was some kind of logical flow chart. And that's what
what's the process?
So if you're thinking about quitting something, whether it's a relationship or a job or whatever, and I wish I had my book in front of me because it is quite an extensive. Oh, I do. You're actually leaning on it. This is
We're going to drop down by about an inch and a half, get the book out.
Okay.
And then we've got the...
Yeah, fine. So I want to run you through this because I actually think it's really important. And nobody's ever given me this before in my life in terms of a framework for deciding when to quit something. And it's also something that I would love to I would love to debate with people, because I was alone in a jungle when I wrote this. And here we go. So the chapter is called I Quit My Job, and it's chapter 11 in my book. And I've drawn this very useful little flow chart you can see here. So the first question is, are you thinking about quitting something? Right? And that's either yes or no. If the answer is no, why are you looking at the fucking flow chart? If the answer is yes, go to the next chapter. No. If the answer is yes, I ask you, why are you thinking about quitting? And there's typically two reasons why people are thinking about quitting. And I make these words intentionally ambiguous. So because something sucks or because it's hard, right? And if it sucks, that for me means it's toxic, it's intrinsically unfulfilling, whatever it might be in your own definition. If it's hard, it's because it's a challenge, right? You're not qualified to do it. It's difficult, like running a marathon, you're on the 22nd mile or whatever. If you're trying to quit because it's hard, is the challenge worth the potential reward? This is kind of the question I've always asked myself. So in the hardest moments of my business, which were always in the first years, it was really, really hard, but the potential reward in my mind was worth the hardship. So if the answer to that question is yes, don't quit. If you're doing something hard that isn't worth the potential rewards, quit, right? Let's move to the other side of the flow chart. Say you're thinking about quitting because it sucks, which is actually where I found myself in with my company. It started to suck, right? It wasn't hard, it sucked. Do you believe you could make it not suck? Question I asked myself all the time. Do I think I could go and have the meetings I need to have with the board and with other people to make this company, for me, the company doesn't suck, it's a great company, for me, the experience for me and what I want out of my life not suck? If the answer is yes, you then ask yourself that question again, which is the effort it would take to make it not suck, that traveling around the world persuading, worth it? Yes or no? And so if it's not worth it, if you think that it would require a year of your life, a million conversations, a gazillion conversations, and it's not actually worth the rewards to put that effort in, then you quit. If not, don't quit. Do the work, fix it, and you get it right. However, I got to the point where I thought that the effort it was required to make the experience for me not suck anymore wasn't actually any worth the rewards anymore. I was an 18-year-old kid that started, I started that business at 21. Started the business at 21, got really diluted. As you get diluted as a young guy, you give up control. You can't take back, shareholder control. The business had got bigger. I didn't have the control I wanted to have over the top level things. And I also owned a small piece of the company by this point. And so you have those two factors there where it's going to take a lot of effort to change it, but the rewards on offer for you as an entrepreneur aren't actually that great anymore. So this led me to this part on the flow chart where I was thinking about quitting. I didn't believe that anymore that I could make it not suck, and the effort to make it not suck wasn't going to be worth it. So I ended up quitting. And this is a framework you can basically use for everything, I think. It's simplified enough for you to, make it work for you and to make sense for you, and hopefully for the reader as well.
Having just come out of Social Chain, how did you decide what you were going to do next?
It's a really good point. I went off to the jungle in Costa Rica to spend some time alone with my thoughts, which is actually when I started writing the book. And I think it's chapter 10 or something in the book, 10 or 11, where I start thinking about that. And I realized that the tempting thing to do is just to go and do the same thing again. But there's a number of problems with that. One of the things that I discuss in the book that makes humans intrinsically motivated is challenge. And the challenge of doing the same thing again, when you're the type of person that I am, is not very challenging, to say the least, right? And the next thing that played on my mind was why I would go and do the next thing again. And it's because of comfort. It's because I have this label that's been given to me by society and by my past and by my accomplishments, which is social media CEO. And there's this temptation to then spend the next 10 years of my life living out those labels, right? To think that's who I am and to play follow the implicit instructions of those labels. And I dwelled on that and thought that this is probably why a lot of people get themselves into these like midlife crises where they lose their intrinsic joy for their work, and they start to question who they were because they let society or their past or their mum define who they are. And then they just played that role until they got to 41 years old. They're working at KPMG and they're thinking about jumping out the window. And so I thought the most intrinsically rewarding way I could probably live my life was to resist my labels and to go back to these, because labels as well, they're just a bunch of really unhelpful words that we give ourselves to make ourselves make sense. So I thought go back to the fundamentals. What am I, right? Who am I? I'm a guy with a bunch of skills that loves so many things. I don't have one singular passion. I have tons of passions. I like music and playing with my dog and my niece, and I like art, and I like video games and FIFA and football and business. I didn't like social media. Like I didn't come out of the womb. My passion wasn't social media. Social media didn't exist when I came out of the womb. So how could that be my innate passion anyway? But there's principles about that job and that I did like. I liked working with teams. I liked having a big ambition. I liked the challenge. I liked storytelling. And these are things that can apply to any industry. So I resisted my labels. And over the since I've left, about 9 months, I think it's been now, 6 or 9 months, somewhere in that region, I've just resisted my labels. I wrote a book. I've learned to DJ. I've got a big theatrical show that I've sold out in Manchester, written and directed by me. The music's done by me. I've been working in one of the biggest biotech companies in the world, in the mental health space for the last 6 months. A $3 billion biotech company. I've been working at Huel, which is the fastest growing, it was the fastest growing e-commerce company internationally in the UK. I'm on the board there. I'm about to accept another board role at one of the fastest growing companies in a completely different industry, in the beauty industry. And why the fuck not? I thought to myself that this is how I would behave if I truly resisted my labels. And my inspirations that hang on the walls in some of my rooms in this house, Elon Musk or Kanye West, I don't love all of their ideas, but the thing I love and admire most about those individuals was they didn't let their past or a label or anything define them. Elon, Zip2, PayPal, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, and Kanye started as a producer, and they said, "You're a producer, you can't rap." And he not only rapped, he put on shows and clothes and shoes and choirs and everything. And that inspires me. I think that's a free way to live. I think everybody, the vast majority, 99% of people don't live freely. They live confined by words that, their mum or dad or themselves have given them. And those words are restrictive. And why be restrictive? I'm going to die anyway. It doesn't fucking matter. So.
Yeah, I think one of the central themes of your book is to remind people that much of what we're told by the culture at the moment will not make them truly happy or fulfilled. Identifying that is great, but how can people actually rid themselves of those internalized values that don't serve them?
I think one of the easiest ways to do it, if I had to just give a simple way, it's like to constantly question the question. Maybe that's my single greatest skill or gift. I say gift because it's not that intentional. It just seems to be what happens when someone presents me with something. A good example is my book promo. So we're doing my book promotion today. And I said to my publisher, they said, what we do is we get like an envelope and we put the book in an envelope and send it out to people. And I was like, but this, that's not necessarily a great idea because we want these influencers to post. So what we'll do is we'll print $100 bills. And Chris, if you get your box, it will have your face on it. It comes with this mirror. It says happy, this big Instagrammable box. And we won't send 100, we'll send 1,000. And they go, oh no, but that's not how it's done. Why would you do that? And I'm like, well, think about it from a psychological perspective. If I see something 3 times in a short period of time, if we can get them all delivered on the same day, we get the world's biggest influencers. But they go, no, but that's not how it's meant to be done. And then they're like, oh no, but you can't print money. That's illegal. You can't put the money. And that moment there that is a perfect metaphor for the slow, almost subtle force that you'll face many times a day in your life of life just saying stick to the blueprint, and stick to convention. And it's that little bit of resistance where you've got to turn and say, no, we're going to do it this way. And for me, that was at 16 when I decided that school wasn't going to get me to where I wanted to go, or university day one where I call my mum and I say, Mum, listen, I'm dropping out of university. And she says, I'm not going to speak to you until you go back. Didn't speak to her for 2 years. And subtly, it was when I started to promote the book. And if you look at Instagram today, we probably I was trying to do the numbers. I was like, probably had £500,000 in free marketing today alone. Sent out 1,000 books. I reckon I've been tagged already, today. What time is it? It's 5 p.m. today. And most of my friends haven't got it yet. Maybe 500 or 600 times. These influencers, some of them have 3 million followers. That one moment of resistance where life, in this case, my publisher was like, no, that's not the way it's always been done. And having the conviction to resist and think in terms of first principles, is the most important thing for me. And I've built the case study now, so you can't tell me otherwise. And a lot of people haven't built the case studies. You built the case study for yourself. It's much easier to resist in those moments and to rely on your first principles. But Yeah, I built the. So there's no going back for me now. I can't unsee what I know. So it's thinking in terms of first principles, and very honestly, that's just about questioning the question. When you come to promote this podcast, you will do what you did last time. That's what like most people do, and I do the same thing. And like what I do with my team now is I'm like, what is the like 1% marginal gain? What is the like one new idea based on first principles to try and get that 1%? And that's a mental philosophy, which is continually like questioning the question and trying to think of new ideas, even though it requires much more sort of mental effort. Yeah,
I agree, man.
If you do that in your life, you'll go somewhere else. If you're able to do that in your life, it's just tough, and it's apparently scary. And I say apparently because, in fact, the most scary thing is not doing that. But trying to persuade people of that is probably an argument I won't win, just like the Jesus bullet mother head analogy I give. Like trying to convince you that the thing that you should fear is not taking a risk, is a battle I probably won't win.
Well, my TEDx talk, which I recorded a couple of weeks ago, had a section in this which is quoted from mutual friend of ours, George McGill, although I wasn't able to actually reference him on the slides, but I quoted him directly from an episode I did in your old office upstairs. Oh, yeah. And Ollie was filming it. And it's talking about the fact that I'm astounded by how many people want to be spectacular in life, but also want to be normal. By being normal, you are, by definition, aiming for average. You regress to the mean by doing what everyone else does. By doing what everyone else does, you get what everyone else has got. Normal people get normal results. Weird people get weird results. You call it questioning the question. I call it assessing assumptions. Like we all have assumptions about the world, about how things should be done, about the way that we're supposed to release a book, the way that we're supposed to release a podcast, construct a conversation, all of these things. But when you assess your assumptions, and its first principles is now the sort of buzzword of the last few years, popularized by Shane Parrish and Elon Musk. But what I find interesting about what you just said there is that it's innate, because what a lot of people want, it may
Maybe
have been,
not innate,
but it may have been developed, but that it's something that's built into your source code, because there are people who struggle to rebel, and there are people who find rebelling a little bit easier.
Yeah. I think it might be somewhat connected to my self-belief and like what you've just described there, where you said, everybody wants to be extraordinary, but everyone also wants to be normal, it's like because risk and reward, like we all want no risk, which is being normal, safety, stay within the sheep pen. And then we all want a gazillion pounds and to live an extraordinary life, which is the reward. So like, of course none of us want risk, but we want to optimize reward. And like, I think that maybe that ability to question, you think, what does it take to think from first principles and to write your own script? It takes fucking guts for a start, because you are quite literally writing a new blueprint. It's like walking down, I used to live in the woods, and I'd walk this path every single day to get home. And then I look up the hill and I think, well, I actually live there. So why am I walking this path, which is going to be like a mile down this way, then it's going to cut right, when I theoretically could just cut up this hill and go straight to my house? And this is like a metaphor for life again. It's like, well, but this is the path, and there might be snakes there, and there's not like a carved out, smooth, way for you to walk. And so what does it take to go up there? It takes a sense of adventure. Where does that come from? That comes from probably nurture. It takes some self-belief. It takes the conviction and the confidence to be wrong, which again probably comes from self-esteem, right? Because if I walk up this path and I get up there and everyone laughs at me and says, well, there's a big fence, you fucked up. That takes a certain sense of self-esteem. People don't want to risk their self-esteem, especially when they have a weak self-esteem. So maybe it's more nurture than I think. But what I'm saying is now it feels innate. I can't pretend that and I don't choose it on a daily basis. Like the argument with my publisher, it felt like that was the right thing. And I was fighting for what I knew was right. I didn't sit back and think, okay, let's think first principles here, and then start like writing out on a piece of paper. That's what I mean by it feels almost innate now. It's so second nature to me to question the question and to not accept questions when they're asked. And the one I talk about in the book, I think there's a chapter on it. I say I think because sometimes I'm not sure if it's a chapter or just a section. Which is, no, it is a chapter. It says, Mum, stop asking me about love. And it's like you come home and your mum says, oh, you're dating Melanie, are you? Yeah. Are you in love? And that moment of like, oh shit, now I have to answer either yes or no. And my definition of love has to be exactly the same as hers. And if it's no, then fuck, what's wrong? Right. And if it's and then but if it's yes, then that means I'm getting married. And the unnecessary pressure to like slide into one of these binary boxes doesn't help my relationship with my girlfriend. You know what I mean? So why do we fuck around with these questions when they're like really unhelpful? And that's another thing I uncover in the book, which is like how invalid so many of the questions we ask ourselves are. You know, I think I say in the book as the example, what number is blue? And it's a perfectly reasonable question because you know what numbers are and you know what blue is. So what number is blue? And it's the same thing. Are you in love? Is this your passion? You know what you are. You know what passion is. So are you? Just because you can just because you can ask a question doesn't mean it's valid or worth answering or worth stressing over or worth overthinking over. And like 70% of the young kids in my DMs are messaging me because they're imprisoned by a question that society's trying to make them answer. Steve, I'm 22 and I haven't found my passion. And they're like, some of them are like verging on suicidal because of these questions. Genuinely. You look like I'm like, bro, fuck, I don't know what my fucking passion is either. Just like stop asking yourself shitty questions and like follow your joy and do the stuff like, unless the stuff you don't like. And that kind of foundational thinking and not this sort of binary jump in this box thinking is freeing again. And it lets you live a more peaceful life.
If people shouldn't be trying to find their passion, what's a better question that they should be asking themselves?
So the problem with the word passion is it's inherently binary. It's like inherently too binary, but it also comes with a definition that you don't actually know, right? So like a good example is like the word like love or passion. Like I love my dog. I love Marmite. I love my girlfriend. I love my mom. Lamborghinis. I love, 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 love. We spray this word around so like ubiquitously that we don't actually know what it really means. And it means different things apparently in different situations. And so if someone comes to you and says, do you love Jenny? And you think, well, fucking like, oh God, you know, I don't know what you mean. I have to understand your definition of that to understand if I can fit in the box you've just asked me to jump in. With the passion question, I tend to ask myself in my life, it's like, am I enjoying this? You could ask yourself, am I happy? Do I feel good? These are like more foundational questions, which are subjective, and it doesn't require me to know your definition of the words and then to fit into it in a binary way. That's probably what I ask myself in my life. It's like, does this feel good? And as it relates to my time at Social Chain, in the end, it didn't feel good anymore. And as I say in my quitting framework, I didn't think I could change it. And even if I could change it, I didn't think it would be worth it. So super easy decision. Not brave, not courageous, brave to stay. Imagine something not feeling good. You don't think you can change it, and you think you might be able to change it, but the rewards of changing it aren't worth it, and you stay. That takes courage. I don't have courage. Like people say this when I dropped out of university. Oh, you're so brave. No. Brave would have been staying in a situation I hated and toughing it out. That's courage. You know what I mean? So again, this is the war of words and how it ruins people's lives.
I get it. I think the main thing that I learned from 1984, reading that, is the volume of your vocabulary and the accuracy of the words that you use directly influences the quality of your thoughts. And what you're relating to here is that any word is just a nearest approximation for a notion that you have in your head. All of the things, the emotions, the concepts that you're trying to convey, you find the nearest possible term linguistically, apply it to that, and then try and get across something which is subtly slightly different. Schadenfreude, German has some wonderful words that we don't have. And this is one of the interesting things about hearing them, because you go, oh, that's almost like a thing that I didn't know. It's like a thing that didn't exist until there was a word for it.
Mm-hmm. And this is exactly what Elon talks about with Neuralink as well, and why he talks about the loss in communication, but also how, if in terms of like computers and the bandwidth they have versus like our vocabulary, I think it's the same thing. The most foundational vocabulary I have, if you were to call it a vocabulary, is like how I feel and my sensory experience. And then you're right, I try and communicate it with another person using these words that we've all agreed mean something, but you've experienced one thing, I've experienced it, and we've said that the word is love. Is that the same thing? And there's loss in translation there, and that's why I try and take it back to foundational things, which is like, how do you feel? Because maybe that's your first language, and maybe it's the language which is easiest to articulate for most people. Like we're quite good at understanding how we feel, but these societal Instagram, movie, magazine inspired words like bay and love and passion, these ones are confusing for me, and there's a greater loss in translation when they come with all this baggage, and especially when they're really important words like love and passion. These are the most important decisions we make in our life, and we've distilled it to 4 letters, and we all have to say yes or no. This is a risky fucking game to play. And that's why I wrote the chapter in my book about like, Mum, stop asking me about love, because I'm like, this is a dangerous and risky, a useless question to ask me.
Talking about Instagram, how is following Kylie Jenner a type of self-harm?
Yeah, this is something that I thought about a lot in the book, because, you know, I've got a lot of Instagram friends, a lot of girls that are Instagram influencers that I've known for a long time, and they seem to have a 5x greater prevalence of mental health disorders. I've always wondered why that was. Then I spoke to Johanna Hari, the famous author of Lost Connections, and he talked about the 9 real reasons why people are getting depressed and anxious, and it started to make a bit more sense to me. And then I went and did my own reading and studying for my book, and a lot of what I was looking at is how our mind works and how it makes its decisions, and how it makes these split comparison oriented decisions that we needed to make in order to survive. 10,000 years ago, when a lion's running at you, you think, okay, fucking run. Or when something happens and you can't over process or turn to, deep logical thought to find answers, you have to make split decisions. We see it today. The studies show that if you present someone with 3 steaks on a menu, one's really expensive, one's middle, and one's cheap, they'll think the top one's too bougie, the bottom one's a shit steak, and the middle one's probably the one, so they'll pick the middle one. If in a TV shop they give you 3 TVs on a wall, and there's, the top one's super expensive, the same thing, they'll pick the middle one. And even in more other ways, that this thing I write about in the book where they did a study, they said, would you be willing to drive, I think it's an hour to save £10 on a £200 jacket, or an hour to save £10 on a £10 jacket? It's an hour and you're saving £10. But the way people make that decision is totally different. They think, well, I'd rather drive the hour to save £10 on a £20 jacket. But it's an hour of your time and a £10 save. These aren't logical decisions. And the same applies for Instagram. We make very, and another example that I'd like to give is, I remember when I got my first phone, my Nokia brick phone, and I could play Snake on it. I remember feeling like the bee's knees in school. Going into school, I had polyphonic ringtones. I was the man, my big aerial. If I had that phone today, how would I feel? And I pondered that question, like if I had that phone today in a world full of iPhones, how would I feel? I would feel ashamed, because the value, and the phone hasn't changed. The Nokia phone is the same game, same ringtones, everything. But the context in which it exists has changed. And that, in the human mind, changes as it does with the menu and the TVs, the perceived value of that thing. And this is what's happening on Instagram is, I know me, I look in the mirror every single day. When I look down into this phone, I'm making very snap comparison oriented judgments about my own value, my own appearance, my own body, based on what I see. But what you're seeing is fake. And I speak to a cosmetic surgeon and he says, oh my God, this is the best era ever for my business, because girls are coming in with photos from Instagram. He said, I've never had more Instagram references ever for surgery in my life. And now they all want to change their bodies. He said the biggest rise we've seen is girls coming in with a photo of Kylie Jenner or the Kardashians, and they want to change the shape of their body. And also the Facetune CEO says he sat on a gold mine, because people are looking at Instagram. The brain does what it does, lazy as hell, comparison orientated. It's telling you that because she looks like that, you are a piece of shit. You can't avoid that. That's what I said. There's a chapter called Fire Your Mind. You can't stop that. You can't say, oh, man, I'm going to stop doing comparisons. This is why like half my quotes I know don't actually help, because you can't just say stuff like the Jesus analogy. You can't just tell yourself to stop comparing. It's a survival mechanism. But unfortunately, in the era we live in, that is killing your self-esteem. It's toxic for your mind. And that's why I say stop keeping up with the Kardashians. I think that's one of the chapters, chapter 4.
There is a statistically significant increase in cosmetic surgery called the Zoom boom of lockdown face. And it's because of the amount of people that have been looking at themselves for 6 hours a day plus on video conferencing calls. And plastic surgeons have been reporting that. T. John's from up here. Mr. Esho, Dr. Esho is from up here in Newcastle originally. So I've been sort of following his work for a while as well. One of the things that I thought was really interesting.
Can I just say something on that as well?
Yeah, sure.
Think about the term fat. It doesn't sound like a comparison, but then remove everybody from planet Earth. And suddenly you're not fat. You're the prettiest, sexiest, richest person on Earth. You are by definition enough suddenly, just because I removed everybody else. And we don't actually realize that most of these adjectives or descriptive words are just comparison based. And I would be the sexiest man alive. I could just kill everyone else.
You would also be the unsexiest man alive. You would also be the fattest man alive. You would also be the this.
100%.
And this is naturally what happens. You come from a hierarchical background ancestrally, and you compare. Who am I above? Who am I below? You continue to aim up. You continue to kind of dispose of the people that are down. How do you find that creeping in with yourself? Like, obviously, you do this self-work, the same as me. We spend a lot of time doing gratitude journaling and internal work. How do you, when you notice that creeping in, that ego, that self-talk, that destructive monologue, what do you do?
It's a good question. So it's a really interesting one because there's so many contradictions here. I'm someone, and I discussed this in the book. In fact, the 20th chapter is kind of trying to answer the contradiction between believing that you're enough whilst also striving for so much more. Always felt like a contradiction I just couldn't understand. And then again, as I get into the chapter, it's actually just I'm making a mistake with a bunch of words. Enough sounds like, this idea that I wasn't enough sounds like some kind of internal measure of my self-worth that came from somewhere. And the truth is it came from my perception of the outside world and external validation. I thought that when I was broke, I was less than. And so I strived to be more than, or to get to the point where I was enough. And in fact, the whole time, I've always been the same. There's never been a change in my intrinsic, inherent value. That was just external, status games that I was playing in my mind. So I wanted to get myself to this point where I knew that I was enough, because that's the foundation you need to chase the right things for the right reasons. For example, my friend, who I described earlier, the billionaire friend with all the clothes and the houses and the sports cars, this is the guy that doesn't know he's enough yet. So he thinks by getting a room full of trainers and color coordinating them, that will make him enough. So he started chasing the wrong things for the wrong reasons. The most important thing for me was getting myself to that point where I knew that intrinsically, no matter what I did, no matter how successful I become, my inherent value doesn't change. And then that has become the platform to be competitive and chase and be aggressive at the things that really matter to me. And that's the phase in life where I'm at now, where when I'm chasing something, when I want to be number one at something, or I want to be the best at something, I'm largely doing it, not completely, I'm largely doing it because the prize at the end of that is worthwhile intrinsically for me. So I can channel that ambition and that competitiveness and that desire to be number one and to win. But knowing that when I get there, or if I get there, because a lot of the time I set myself goals that I don't think I'll ever even achieve, the journey will be intrinsically rewarding. That's been a big thing. And as you say, do I find myself in moments seeking external validation or not thinking I'm enough? I'd say yeah, but just 95% less than I used to. Maybe more, maybe 97% or something in that region.
I'm really glad to hear that, man. It's really encouraging to know, especially coming from the background in the industry that you were in, right? You were weaponizing the platforms that you're now criticizing. Your company was built off the back of that. And that insight obviously has enabled you to transform more effectively personally. I've got a story actually that you told while we were out at dinner. And this kind of highlights, I think, what you're talking about here, that you're prepared to do things just because you want to win at them and you're prepared to put effort in. You were talking about, I want to say that you were at some sort of conference or maybe a race event, and you and your friends were competing about who could get the most calories burned on their Apple Watch. And you noticed one of your friends on a Sunday night at the end of the week was in the gym training. So you decided to excuse yourself and then go and run sprints on a set of stairs nearby.
I was at dinner with Philip Green's family, the very notorious billionaire. I was in Monaco. They'd invited me for dinner. First time I'd met the full family. yeah, very important dinner in this beautiful, beautiful restaurant in Monaco. And me and my friends have spent 10 weeks every week competing against each other, 6 friends, to see who can do the most calories. But then also you can compete individually at the same time. I'd never lost. I never lost. I wouldn't allow myself to lose. So for 9 weeks, I hadn't lost. I'm in the 10th week. I'm at the dinner. It's 11 o'clock. It shuts the competition closes at midnight. And I look down and I just see Don McGregor, my old business partner, who's in the group. I see him doing a workout at 11, quarter past 11 or something like that. And I'm at this dinner. And yeah, I have a personal philosophy where like, I'm not going to voluntarily lose. Something else might be the reason I lose, but it's not going to be a decision that I make. And it is a decision. So I said, I said to the people at dinner, I said, I'm just going to excuse myself. I'm just going to walk back to the hotel. I fucking sprint back to the hotel across the street. I'm up in the bathroom in the hotel, and I put my phone recording, and I start recording a video for them in the group, and I start doing a HIIT workout, and I'm screaming at the phone. I'm telling them, I'm saying, never try that again. You never try and do me like that again. And I beat them. And I never lost. I never lost that competition. I've competed against all of them individually for 10 weeks and then the whole group collectively. And I wouldn't lose. And I don't let myself lose. Because for me, it doesn't matter. But you're setting a personal philosophy for yourself every single day and every decision you make. I talk to my team about that, but I also talk to them individually. Like, I'm like, are you going to allow that thing to be part of your personal philosophy? Like the way that you conduct yourself. So for me, in that moment, had I let myself lose, like made the decision that I was going to lose, then somewhere in my brain, I think, well, maybe that kind of thinking will then creep into other areas of my life that are probably more important, especially as they compound over time. So I just make the decision that I'm not going to choose to lose. And that was that story. But it's an insight into the way that I think.
I love that story, man. That's why I've remembered it. What do you think Stephen 10 years from now would tell Stephen now?
I mean, the only way that I could answer that question is by going back the other way and saying, like, what would 28-year-old Stephen have told 18-year-old Stephen? So, because that's all I know now, right? So that's the experience that I can draw upon. And I would have told 18-year-old Stephen, like, it's funny because I ask people this question, like really successful people, and they all tend to answer the same way. They all said,
are you going to do the same thing? Are you going to fob me off
with
an answer,
try and be
repurposed answer from them?
Like, I asked Rio Ferdinand last week, I asked Ant Middleton, and they all say nothing. No, Noel Clark was the one I asked. They all say nothing because it might like upset the domino effect of the thing that led me here. But for me, it would have just been more conviction. It would have been like experiment even more and fail faster. I think, I'm 28 now. I think I could have got to where I am now by probably about 26, 25, 24 if I just failed faster, had more conviction. And then the other thing is focus. So, and it's almost like a bit of a paradox for me it's almost a bit of a contradiction for me to say to experiment more, but to focus, right? But when you choose your experiments, you double down and you move fast and hard and aggressively in that direction. And the worst possible case scenario is doing loads of experiments, but with low focus, right? So now in the phase of my life that I'm in, every experiment I do, I pick more selectively and I apply more focus. Whether that's in my business, my personal brand, my podcast, whatever it is, my book. And that's the point of conviction. I think it will get me there faster. It will allow me to achieve more, and it will accelerate my personal development and bring the day where I'm my best version of myself one step closer. Although that day will never arrive.
It's always going to keep moving away. Man, thank you so much. It's been long overdue catch up since we were last together in Dubai.
Yeah, thank you, bro. You're killing it, and I love what you stand for. It's such a powerful podcast that you have, and I think you're getting the credit that you deserve for the content you produce. And it doesn't take long for, I think, someone that's making great stuff. There's a bit of a lag on it sometimes to get the credit they deserve for what they're producing, and your consistency is inspiring as well, because that's the thing that I think sort of comes before great success. Is just someone that shows up every day and just follows, does something that they love. So if I could bet, if you were a stock and I could invest, I would invest.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my dad used to say form is temporary but class is permanent, and I've always held that with me. Happy Sexy Millionaire will be linked in the show notes below. Usually when I talk about the book, I like pick it up like this, but it's currently at the Royal Mail depot for me to go and collect, so I'm going to do that before it closes. Yeah, what a bastard. So I'm going to go and collect it. But man, congratulations, really well done. Seeing someone who's young from the UK swimming in the circles that you do, and personally for me as well, utilizing a team the way that you do, personal branding team, small, focused. It's really inspiring in the right form of the word, right? It's somebody who's grinding through the operations, who's being very open and transparent about the things that they do and about their failures. And long may it continue, dude. I think the UK's lagged behind in this sort of arena, whatever you want to call it, this sense-making, insight, sort of entrepreneurial vision world for far too long. And it's our language, right? So if you're part of the if you're part of the sort of the new age of the British Empire, then so be it.
I love that. Yeah, it's so true. No, you're so right. And at some point you get the temptation. People say, "Oh, go to LA." They try and persuade you to go out there and become.
You're going out for a month. Don't say that. I know that you're going out for a month in a couple of weeks' time.
Well, maybe we'll see. All these restrictions, but no, it's good. It's really good to see people from the UK like yourself that are like creating global platforms, because we're told in the UK to just focus on people around, nationally. So it's nice to see, you've got killer guests coming on your podcast, and that's a testament to what you've been able to build here. So well done. It's amazing.
Thank you, brother. Look, until next time, man, we will catch up. Good luck with the rest of the book tour. Everything will be linked in the show notes below, including Steve's fantastic podcast. Go and check it out. But for now, man, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.